car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Hi there, glad to have you with us. Art Franklin here. And so you want to know more about insurance, right? Well, you have come to the right place because we got everything you need to know. Our topic this evening, what you don't know about insurance. Turns out there's a lot that I don't know, so I'm sure you're going to get some really good information. Let's talk to the legal minds here. Josh Wright is the managing partner at Hollis Wright, and with us, our very special guest, Callie Brister. So glad to have you here on The Attorneys.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
And this is your first time on the show.
First time.
Well,
we're
super excited. All right, so Callie, tell us, you have a really solid background. I've heard this in kind of pre-production stuff. Tell us a little bit about your background and where you're working now, and a little bit about your firm, and then we'll get into insurance stuff.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Tuscaloosa. Went to play softball at Sanford in undergrad. Stayed for law school after, and then I moved to Houston after law school. So I started my practice in Texas. Started out doing insurance defense, which I hated, and then I moved into large volume plaintiffs work. Okay. Moved back to Birmingham in March of 2023 and linked up with these guys at Turnbull, Holcomb, and Lemoyne, great guys, and started working with them in May, and it has been incredible.
Well, great firm, and of course, Brett and I go way back. He's a big buddy of mine, and I love what they're doing and what your firm's doing, so we're super excited to have you on.
So super happy to be here.
All right, so one of the things that I learned that I did not know kind of going into this, of course, we do a lot of insurance-based work, just like you guys do. But one of the things I learned is roughly almost 15% of people on our roads are uninsured, even though by law they're supposed to be insured.
That's right.
That's out of control.
I know. It was a statistic that I learned also. But it was a statistic that I looked up because I have encountered so many claims where there's no uninsured motorists there available. And clients can't get their medical bills paid for because there's not enough coverage.
So, typical example that you and I both see, I know, is I've been involved in an accident. The other person completely caused this accident. I didn't do anything wrong, but now it turns out that they're not insured. What do I do? I know you get that question a lot, and so do I. And just kind of talk to a client, if you will, about that circumstance.
Sure. So what you'll do initially is try to open a claim with the insurance company insured by the party that hit you. You'll find out that there wasn't coverage, they weren't insured at the time, their policy lapsed, and then you'll go back to your insurance company and open a separate claim, an underinsured, uninsured motorist claim. And they'll evaluate the claim and they'll pay what your coverage is, if you have coverage, right? So you have to elect either to have the coverage or not. A lot of people do not choose coverage just to save $1, right?
And you may have been continue to go, but I was going to ask a question related to that. I mean, ultimately, the advice I give to people is uninsured motorists is rainy day coverage that is not expensive coverage. You need to slam as much as you can and what you can afford into your policy.
Absolutely. And I even looked it up when I was sort of researching this, is what would it cost you annually to add underinsured, uninsured motorists? It's about $75 to $100, right? So I was talking to a friend about this before, someone who does not practice law. She's a school teacher, 26-ish, right? And I said, if I were your insurance adjuster and asked you if you wanted coverage, what would you say? Well, what is coverage, right? Then I explain that, and then I say, okay, well, what's it going to cost me? Well, it'll be about $75 to $100 annually, just per year, to have the coverage. Do you want it? And the answer was no. Just because it's almost like it doesn't become real until you're in that situation and you don't have the coverage. But you don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah, and you know, one of the interesting things that we face a lot, and Callie's firm and our firm faces, is, you know, someone is trying to activate their uninsured motorist coverage if they do have it, and they're concerned that doing that is going to tier them a different way where it's going to increase their insurance premiums with their company down the road. But if you're a not at fault driver and you didn't cause the accident, you're activating your UIM coverage, that does not negatively impact or tier you in a way to increase your insurance premiums. People need to understand that too. So so, Callie's right, though. Ultimately, like someone looks at it and says, well, what if I don't ever need this coverage? I'm paying $75 for it. This is not like a Netflix account, right? Where you're assessing, is this worth it, is it not? The reality is you're going to be involved in an accident. Everyone is going to, the statistics are staggering throughout their lifetime will, and sometimes you're going to need to activate your UM coverage, and it's good to have it.
And because of that, you cannot not have insurance, and plus it's a law anyway, but not all insurance claims go your way. And if they deny your claim, can you dispute that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So either depending on if it's with the liability carrier, meaning the other party that hits you, or if it's your uninsured, underinsured motorist carrier, there are different procedural hoops, right, to jump through, whether it's one or the other. But either way, you can pursue a claim. If liability is disputed, almost always you have to file a lawsuit.
Now, you've had to kind of bone up and understand insurance, UIM, liability in multiple states, because you're actually getting ready to open up a Houston office for your firm.
That's
Is that
right.
fair?
That's right. So we have an office already open in Houston, and we're going to be out there in 2024 a lot more. So I started in Texas, my practice, and so I sort of had to go backwards and learn Alabama law, which is ironic seeing that I went to school at Alabama, or in school at Alabama. So it wasn't as easy to come back to, but stacking UM coverage, I know that won't make sense to a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's not a thing in Texas,
Yeah.
right? And so it's little nuances like that. A guest passenger statute, not a thing in Texas.
You agree, I would suspect, because the laws are different in each state, going to a lawyer to help hold your hand, lead, guide, and direct you through this process is important.
I think it's critical.
Yeah.
Because they're just things that you don't know if you don't know.
Yeah. A good example, Callie mentioned the word stacking. In Alabama, we have the ability to stack a certain number of uninsured motorist policies where you may think you're only entitled to $25,000 of uninsured motorist. Let's say your medical bills, by the way, are $250,000, right? And you may think, well, I only have a $25,000 uninsured motorist policy. What Callie would tell you is when you go and you look at the stacking principles that are allowed in Alabama, the reality is you may be able to stack multiple policies, likely will, and for sure in Alabama, but in some other states, where you can stack those on top of each other and it's not going to ping or ding your liability coverage for tiering purposes over the year. So it's just important to have a lawyer kind of walk you through that process.
Absolutely.
And it's so scary, though, when you get a policy and that policy is 300 pages long. So how important, Callie, is it to really understand the fine print and really go through page by page by page to make sure you understand what you're signing?
Realistically, no one's going to be doing that. And I wouldn't expect people to. I mean, even as a lawyer who deals with the actual policies on a day-to-day basis, the times that I'm having to page through and read the actual language of the coverage is not often, right? Because everything is sort of generally the same, but when it comes to specific nuances and specific cases, you sort of have to dig into the contract language. As a consumer, what I would ask is questions like, well, if I get in an accident, what happens? What kind of coverage is available to me if someone hits me, if I hit someone, that sort of thing. I would ask very practical questions of how much of a headache is this going to be when I get to in a bad situation, right?
I know we're getting ready to go to break. When we come back, I want to talk with Callie a little bit and let her unwrap what for example, 2550 versus a 5100 policy means, because those are terms that insurance adjusters throw around all the time that sometimes can be confusing, but I think Callie can put it into context and perspective that makes complete sense to people, that here's the type of coverage that you need to go consider and ask about, and maybe even some additional questions that you should ask your insurance agent.
Did you see my eyes? I'm confused right now.
I did. It just starts to gloss over.
It just glazes over.
It just completely glazed over. But we've got the best legal minds here for you to understand what you don't know about insurance, as we're talking with Callie Brister, and of course getting information that you need. You can also do this. You can scan that QR code on your television set, get in contact with someone at Hollis Wright, or you can call 1-844-LAW-TALK. On the other end of that call is a Hollis Wright attorney. That call is free. It's confidential. We're glad that you're joining us, and we're going to tell you more about what you don't know about insurance and give you the information that you need to know when we come back. Stay with us.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
Front Porch Alabama is a first-of-its-kind website for shopping Alabama's boutiques, artists, and makers. We promote Shop Local on a statewide basis. We've discovered so many hidden gems in the retail world in Alabama, and we bring them to you right on your phone or your laptop.
State Traditions is an apparel company. As soon as I heard about the concept of Front Porch Alabama, I knew that that was something that we wanted to be a part of. And Front Porch Alabama allows us to reach customers that we would not reach otherwise.
Front Porch Alabama has such a wide variety of products from all across the state. I've got 2 girls that go to college, and I love picking out unique game day outfits for them. And if I find something that I love, I can just click and purchase right on my phone. It's super easy.
Start shopping at frontporchalabama.com today.
The firm's motto is "Your result matters," and we mean that sincerely. Hollis Wright handles cases every day for those at their lowest point, and will do whatever it takes to get the result you deserve. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. What you don't know about insurance, you're going to find out about it today. And we were going to break, and you saw this look on my face, Josh, when you mentioned a couple of terms. I was like, what?
We're trying to educate you today.
Oh,
That's our goal.
That's our goal. You do all the time, but Callie, this is really good stuff. So we wanted to pick up from there. Just
help ease the conscience and the mind of a person that needs to renew their policy every 6 months. When they're working with an insurance adjuster and they hear terms like this is a 25, 50, 25 policy, just number one, let's kind of unwrap what that is.
Sure.
And then maybe some of the questions you just asked that are simple for an adjuster to be able to answer to you that will make sense to the average person, if you will.
So when you go to buy an insurance premium, shopping insurance around, there's sort of 3 options that you're going to see initially. It's a 25/50 coverage, a 50/100 coverage, and a 250/500 coverage, right? And what that means in normal people language, right, is $25,000 of coverage per accident, per person, $50,000 per accident. So let's say you're in a car accident, 2 people are in the other car, right? One person has $25,000 in medical bills, the other person has $10,000 in medical bills. And you have a policy that's $25,000, $50,000 per accident. One person gets their $25,000, the other person gets their $10,000, but you can't pay $25,000 to more than one person, right? So per person, but per accident, you can pay $50,000. From there, it goes up to 50 to 100. So the state of Alabama requires a minimum policy of $25,000. Texas is 30. I think Alaska is like the highest with 50, which I think is so interesting.
Yes. Probably the least amount of accidents.
Right.
I think.
And I was like, people drive on roads in Alaska? Maybe that's why.
Maybe that's why.
Right. So anyway, so in the state of Alabama, $25,000 is the minimum that you could have. So when you're shopping around insurance, the lowest, if you're saying, hey, what's the cheapest policy I can get? They're going to say $25,000 per person, $50,000 per accident. All of these policies also have $25,000 property damage. You can separately elect to go up in your property damage coverage as opposed to your other coverage. So what I would ask when I go is, okay, what does the minimum require me? Okay, how much is this a month, a year, whatever? What's the next, is it a $10 increase or is it a $20 increase to get the next level of coverage? Those are just, and if it's a $10 increase, it feels like a no-brainer to me, because I see it so often and I want to say that out loud for anyone who has questions about it. I can understand sort of a $50 gap, but from what I see, I think it's a $10 to $20 jump between the next coverage, and I would encourage sort of anyone to get the next level of coverage.
And the reality, and I think why Callie is even mentioning that is, look, if you're only covered up to $50,000 or you're only covered up to $100,000, let's assume you have a catastrophic accident where you kill someone, right? Or you hit a pedestrian and have significant injuries, or you have an accident where somebody becomes a paraplegic or quadriplegic. You're only covered to the amount of coverage that you got. That is all your insurance company has to offer to make the case go away. The value of the claim that you cause may be significantly greater than that. So in theory, you are also exposed to potentially an excess verdict on top of the coverages that you bought. So buying more coverage is an appropriate way to protect yourself from the potential for excess verdicts.
I feel much better now than I did when we came back.
And explain a little bit about, what do you mean excess verdict? So what does that look like if a person gets hit with a judgment, insurance covered up to $250,000, but it was a $750,000 verdict? What does that mean for the person the judgment was against?
Yeah. Well, it means that person, in theory, has the judgment against them directly and can be collected directly against them.
Personally liable.
That's right.
So if nothing else, that should encourage you to want to sort of, hey, maybe I'll get more coverage so I'm not personally liable for any sort of wreck that I cause.
Yeah. And so now it goes back to this concept, now that we've unwrapped that a little bit, this concept of stacking and why you should get a lawyer involved. The reality is there's also additional coverage out there, which we talked about earlier, uninsured motorist coverage, where you have the ability to potentially stack some of those. That's not going to ding your own insurance if you are not at fault, but someone else was, and they're not fully insured.
That's right.
So
that's right.
Another reason why you go get uninsured motorist coverage.
And I'm wondering, Callie, can you explain umbrella policies and who should get those?
Sure. So umbrella and excess coverage exist for really the worst case scenario, right? Bigger companies a lot of times will purchase excess and umbrella coverages to deter people from sort of filing frivolous claims. Hey, we have a lot of coverage and it's available for, legitimate claims, but we're not going to entertain these sort of smaller claims. This is why we bought the umbrella policy. So what that looks like in theory, for example, I'll give you one of the cases I have. We have an individual who's driving for Uber Eats. She's looking down at her phone, sort of looks at her phone away from the road, runs into the back of our clients, right? The individual has her own policy, State Farm, covers her up to $30,000, right? Well, both of my clients' medicals exceed the State Farm policy. Well, the excess coverage is Uber Eats from Progressive, right? So that's where an excess policy would kick in. So once the money's exhausted from State Farm's policy, the umbrella excess will kick in, which is very great news for my clients, right? Because their medicals are way above the $30,000.
Let's talk also about a circumstance where you have an individual that owns a home, has a lot of equity in their home, or they have a lot of financial resources. Maybe someone has passed away in their family, has passed money down. Maybe they've earned that through the work that they have, and they have resources. Having an excess policy is a way to also protect yourself from being exposed, as we talked about earlier, to a potential excess verdict greater than your insurance coverage. One of the interesting things about that is if you want an excess policy, generally, and I say generally, it's not always, Callie can confirm this, but generally, the excess carriers are going to require you to carry a larger amount of initial coverage, so not a 25-50 policy with an excess, a 100-300 policy at a minimum in order to get excess above it. And the reason for that is the excess carriers do not want to cover all of that amount above just $25,000 or $50,000. So sometimes you've got to get a greater policy in order to get excess. So it is also a way, as Callie alluded to protect yourself.
The best legal minds that you can find right here on The Attorneys, and we're talking about that insurance. So stay with us. We're going to take a break. I want to remind you, though, you can reach someone at Hollis Wright by calling 1-844-LAW-TALK. On the other end of the line is an attorney from Hollis Wright, and that call is free and it's confidential, and you can do it right now. Stay with us. We'll take a break, and we'll wrap up when we come back.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon. Did you know when you hire Hollis Wright, you are still in charge of your case? Our attorneys at Hollis Wright are client-centered, allowing you to help us control your case and result. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. Remember to scan that QR code on your television set so you can reach someone at Hollis Wright. And we still have a lot to get to because there's so much good information that we're finding out. I'm no longer having that glazed over look because I'm getting this good information from great legal minds. Kylie, so good to have you with us.
Happy to be here.
You know, and here's the thing, too, that a lot of times I've found in life, things are intimidating until you roll your sleeves up and you learn about them, right? And sometimes you just got to dig in and you got to figure it out. And then you're like, all right, why was I intimidated by that? Now I understand it. Well, part of this whole concept of insurance is how do you handle and manage a circumstance if you're involved in an accident, whether it's homeowners coverage, whether it's auto coverage, whether it's the uninsured motorist component. And part of rolling your sleeves up is getting someone like Callie involved early on and making a phone call. So, you know, for example, you guys work just like we do on contingency. Explain a little bit about that where someone doesn't have to pay you to get advice.
Absolutely. Every client that comes to us, a consult is free. So we sort of walk through the case and talk through questions that anybody has. When we get to the end of the conversation, we say, hey, do you want to sign a contract with us? We'd love to help you out with your case. And we work on a contingency fee, like you said. So we take a percentage of the settlement out. Clients don't pay anything up front.
So, all right, that's a way to roll your sleeves up, not be intimidated by a lawyer, number one. But two is, what do you advise if someone's in an accident for them to do after the accident in order to be able to get to a lawyer to kind of lead, guide, and direct them through the process?
Absolutely. First and foremost, always call the police. Always get the police out there, get a police report documented. So many times, even though these accidents happen and people are trying to be nice, right? Like, hey, we don't have to call the police, let's just exchange information. Insurance companies are so reluctant to sort of agree that an accident happened when they don't have a physical document that says so. So it's just always safe to call police, get someone out in the scene, document it. Even if you think you're at fault, I wouldn't sort of talk about any of that. Just exchange your insurance information with the other people. Take photos, property damage. First of all, make sure you're okay, right? If you need to go to the ER, if you're in any pain at all, I would suggest going immediately. You never know if you have a concussion, that sort of thing. Don't want to sleep with one of those things. Go immediately and cooperate with your insurance. I think that's probably one of the things I deal with the most, with people being scared of the insurance companies and not wanting to cooperate with them, thinking that they're going to get in trouble. That's not how it works. You pay for the insurance and they are legally obligated to defend your claim, represent you. And so cooperate with your insurance.
And, you know, one of the things I would mention, too, is you need to call the police if you're at fault more than you probably do if you're not at fault. And here's why. You want your insurance company that you have paid for to make sure you are protected in that accident. And without an accident report, I mean, think about this. Municipal police officers, they have entire departments that this is what they do. Yeah. They go to traffic accidents. They document the accident. That document gets put into a public system that lawyers like Callie and I pull down and go to the insurance companies to work through it. And so you want a accident report to be able to identify what happened, who was involved, what carriers are involved, etc. That's super important. And I think Callie raises, you know, additional really important points, which is get to a lawyer quickly, because you can have a free consult with someone where, you know, again, we go back to this concept of it's only intimidating when you don't understand it. When you have someone that can lead, guide you, and direct you through the process, it's less intimidating. So getting to a lawyer on the plaintiff's side of the bar will allow you to do that.
And Josh, that made me think of a story, something that happened many, many years ago. My son, teenage driver, calls me at work and says, I've been in an accident, and he was at home. I'm like, what are you doing at home? When you leave the scene, is there any protection that you have or coverage that you have if you leave the scene of an accident? So
first and foremost, a hit and run is a felony, right? So if you're involved in an accident and you leave the scene without responding or talking to someone else, that's a felony, right? So I would advise you not to leave the scene if you hit someone. But yeah, you can sort of get yourself in a bind if you hit someone, leave the scene, either whether you exchange information or not. I would advise everyone to sort of stay around, make sure the police come.
Yeah. And in that scenario, you know, they probably agreed to exchange information
Absolutely.
and departed, right? And so I think it's a good question, and it is, you know, you still need to put your insurance carrier on notice immediately. Because I think one of the points that Callie was making, which is don't be afraid to communicate with insurance. Don't be afraid to communicate with your insurance company. And by the way, you have a duty in your contract to do so. That doesn't mean you don't get a lawyer involved, but you've got to communicate with the insurance company in that you've paid for. And then the opposing insurance company, I would highly recommend you get someone like Callie involved to be able to communicate with them directly.
Call the police. Call your insurance company.
Immediately.
Got to do that. That was my advice. Immediately. Let's get this done.
That's right.
Yeah.
What do you see? What do you see most often in accidents? I mean, is it distracted driving? Is it alcohol related? What do you see most often in these cases?
I would say alcohol related is probably the most infrequent. Every now and then, I'd say 1 out of maybe 25 cases would be alcohol related. Those are pretty easy liability wise to jump over the hoop. What I'm seeing is just distracted driving, merging lanes, not yielding the right of way, fender benders, following too closely, all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, and you know, with phones, as we talk about on shows, and I know Callie sees this, that's a huge component of distracted driving. One of the things that I think is important to recognize related to use of your phone is that you have the ability, if you can do the forensic work quickly, you have the ability to identify whether or not that person consistently texts and drives, and whether they were texting and driving around the time of the accident. And sometimes the perception that you were is worse than the reality that you actually were, right? Yeah. So you may say, I wasn't texting and driving, and I don't text and drive. But if a lawyer is able to say, well, hold on now, you took this trip that was 2 hours, and there are 37 texts sent during that time. You know, that is code for an insurance company. We need to resolve this case.
Absolutely.
So getting a lawyer involved quickly is important.
Absolutely.
And I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to ask this question. What happens if you think your insurance company is really not acting in good faith?
You can have your own separate claim. It's called a bad faith claim against your insurance company. And in whichever way they deal with you, whether they're not defending you properly, whether there was a verdict in excess that they didn't tender policy limits on, you can have your own separate bad faith claim that comes from your personal injury claim against your insurance company.
And we could do a whole show on that topic alone. I will say this, I've seen a trend in the last probably 5 years. I feel like insurance companies, because of bad faith, I'm just talking about Alabama now, because of the bad faith claims in Alabama over the last 20 years, I feel like insurance companies are doing it a little bit better than they used to related to investigating these claims. And
I can attest to that just from the standpoint of I don't see it that much and I don't deal with it. And so the first time I heard someone talking about a bad faith claim, I was like, what do you mean? Yeah. You know, sort of, I've never encountered it at all. But it definitely, there's a remedy if your insurance company does not treat you well.
You're about to go to Houston. Don't be a stranger. Come back and see us.
I will.
Nice to have you on. Thank you for being on.
And it's good to end on a good note. It's good that you joined us this week, but we want to go ahead and have you make an appointment to join us again next week as we continue to give you good information on the attorneys. So long for now, but we'll see you back here. Same place, same time.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.